poll. So just why don't you answer the poll? We'll let some results come in just to, level set. And I like the first one. Sorry, is that Viva paper towels, right?
I mean, hey, if you've never heard of Viva, it might be the only thing you're familiar with. So
yeah, and obviously, floor wax dessert topping. That's probably a lot of our products. Just don't know where they fit, and they could be used for a lot of things. So good. So we've got lots of great results. Thank you for joining in on our fun. I'm going to answer the poll right now. I am definitely familiar with it.
Hey, love the people that answered paper towels. Love it. And maybe this is going to be new for you. So Tony's going to do a great recap of just high level of what Viva is before we kind of really dive into Viva Connections and Insights. So.
All right, great. All right, I've closed up the poll. Thank you for your participation. Always great. Tony, over to you, my friend.
Excellent. Thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, just looking at the poll. Yeah, a lot of good. It seems like a mixed bag here of people that aren't really familiar with Viva and some that aren't. Like Sarah said, we'll do a quick recap of the different pillars that we have that make up Viva, and then we're really going to dive deep into Viva Insights from the personalized view of Viva Insights. And then, of course, I think the bulk of this is really going to be around Viva Connections, as it is a great way to kind of start getting more familiar with the different tools that we have with Microsoft Viva and really what our engineering team is aiming at with these different products that we have released. So one other thing that I will mention, we are going to start out pretty high level. Again, kind of a recap what our engineering team is kind of envisioning with this different product. We do get fairly technical and SharePoint heavy towards the end of this for Viva Connections. We're really going to dive deep into best practices, how to deploy it, what I see in the field right now with Viva Connections, and some of the successful deployments that I have seen, and some gotchas as well. And then, of course, at the very end, we do have a lot of resources, a lot of help out there from just myself and from Microsoft in general, from customer engineers. We have a lot of training and workshops and stuff like that available to you guys as well. If we are looking at really diving into Microsoft Viva as really becoming a flagship of Microsoft 365 going forward. So with that, just to kind of set the tone here. So based off of really some research and studies and just kind of getting an overall feel of a lot of our customers out there, we're really looking at figuring out, especially with COVID as well, what our employees are seeing as a great employee experience. And so they kind of put it into 6 different buckets where we want to have some type of well-being. You feel safe at work, physically, mentally, emotionally. We have some type of a connection between all of our different team members, our colleagues. And again, the connection part of this is really what has been affecting a lot of employees that are kind of stuck at home and not being able to have that connection with all their different coworkers. And they kind of feel like they're in their own work environment and kind of feel segmented out. And then some type of focus, being able to prioritize different areas of the job, whether that be mixing around different meetings, making sure that we have a specific focus time, being able to prioritize things that we really need to focus on. Some type of empowerment where you can easily find information, people, tools, resources that you need, and you're going to hear me say this a lot, and consistent experience where all of these different resources are available to these different users is something that we find very important. Some type of growth where you can learn, have a lot of different resources available to you so that you can watch a training video, for example, and carve some time out from there. And then finally, do we have some type of purpose, being part of something bigger than yourself, being able to communicate directly with different users, leadership, all of that is something that we find very important. And that is what our engineering team kind of put together for what they call the Employee Experience Platform, or EXP. And so really what Microsoft Viva is trying to intertwine with are, again, these different aspects of it, having some type of communication announcements from the corporate side of things so that we can bring together all of our users into one platform with any announcements that we have. any company resources, pay, benefits, an expense report tool, for example, that is right at their fingertips, either from mobile or desktop, something that we're not going to 17 different areas in order to get to the same endpoint. Any insights, any analytics, feedback, sentiment surveys, all of that, something that can be at their fingertips. Having some readily available knowledge, whether that be around a project and the people that are working on that project, or it could be anything from just documents that are associated with that project, just right there in front of you when you're looking and searching for that within the platform. And then having some type of community, having some diversity and inclusion, interest groups, all of that, being able to communicate on a corporate communication side as well too, within one area for each of your different users. And then of course, some type of well-being, something to help your users organize and being able to focus on important aspects of their position. And then any growth and development, again, any learning and coaching and being able to carve some time out from everybody's busy schedule so that you can improve upon yourself, whether that be something specific to their job role or something just mentally as well too. So this is the employee experience platform is, again, really the centerpiece of what we have with Microsoft Viva and what we're trying to do within this product. So with all that being said, they've put this into 4 different buckets with Microsoft Viva. We have Viva Connections. Again, we're going to talk really heavily into Viva Connections, and because it's really, again, a great starting point for a lot of your end users in order for them to kind of get the connection between teams and SharePoint, forming that culture and communications between each of the different news posts that you may have from a corporate communication side. We're going to go into Microsoft Viva Insights, the productivity and well-being, and we're going to go into that next here. And then maybe this could be a separate call and a separate training, because these next 2 are very involved as well, which we call Viva Learning. There is a free version of Viva Learning that may have already been deployed to your tenant or should have been already deployed to your tenant, where it's basically like a self-curated platform for any training, whether that be LinkedIn or being able to have admins add training to each of your users from like a SharePoint site using Microsoft Stream. Then there's also some elevated licensing that you can purchase as well too off of that as well. Again, probably a different discussion from the Viva Learning side. And then of course, Viva Topics. Viva Topics is its own licensing SKU. It's not really, would more than likely be an add-on to each of your licensing. But what's great about Viva Topics, and we kind of discussed this from the previous slide, is that it really loops together a lot of the key information that you have, like, for example, like a project that you may be working on with a lot of other colleagues. And what Topics can do is curate like these little contact cards that can facilitate, all right, who's working on this different project, who can I talk to in order to get more information on it, et cetera. So it really helps to kind of formulate using AI, graph, all that stuff that we have on the back end, so that you as an admin aren't the ones that are having to do all of that work in order to gain all of those insights from Viva Topics. So those are the 4 pillars. And again, we're going to talk about Viva Connections and Viva Insights, and we're going to start with Viva Insights. So we're not going to go over all of the different aspects. Again, that could be another hour and a half type of call if we wanted to go into each of them. But what we really wanted to drive at during this session, at least, is where can we start with Viva Insights? And where we can start with Viva Insights is really our individuals that you can see here. And again, just kind of researching and figuring out what our individuals are looking at. Really what they're looking at, especially again with COVID, is they like the flexibility of working from home, but the line between work and life has blurred, and I find it harder to unplug. Again, from the managers and the leaders side of things, we do have some really great tools with Viva Insights that is, again, an elevated licensing SKU. From the individual side of things, though, this is something that you can deploy today with almost every single licensing SKU that corporations have, and something that your users can use really just today in general. So just to kind of look into Viva Insights a little bit further. Again, a lot of it is data driven. This isn't something that you as an admin are really going to have to derive for your users. This is something that's going to be self-curated for them using Microsoft Graph, depending on their role, what they're working on, et cetera. one little tidbit as well too, for those of you that are familiar with My Analytics, this is really just see it as like a rebranding of My Analytics, and then we've added in really the Teams aspect of this, and then added in especially a lot more AI and graph as well. So what you may be familiar with is this email and dashboard for these specific users, and they are able to see, what availability to focus and all that stuff, just to kind of give them a little bit of insight as far as how they can work better. Now, what we've really added into Teams, I know that these are a little bit small. I'm going to go over what this is a little bit further so that you can see what it looks like in real time. But you're going to be able to see some actionable recommendations. So you can get, like, for example, prepare for the day with a briefing email from Cortana, and basically saying these are the different meetings that you have. These are what you can prepare for each of these different meetings that you have for that specific day. Now, probably one of my favorite features that comes with this now is scheduling automatic focus time for your users, so that I don't know about you, but my schedule books up very, very quickly. And instead of me having a blocked meeting from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., what Viva Insights can do is basically look at your calendar and fill up those different spaces that you may have for the week after, so that you have maybe an hour or two of focus time between each of those days, as it is very important from an employee experience side of things to have those breathers, be able to kind of reconnect and then refocus in each of those different days. So again, it just kind of books those times so that other people that are looking to schedule another meeting with you see that it's booked, and really helps you fill out your day from there. Another great feature that I see here is the mindfully wrap up the day with a virtual commute feature that we have. I'm going to show you that in here in just a little bit, but really what you're able to do is kind of prioritize, maybe at like 4 p.m. what are the different tasks that you need to do before 5 p.m. when you need to take off for the day, and really kind of wrap your head around it. And then, of course, we also have graph that is able to see, like, the important people to you within the organization, like your manager, for example, and be able to give you some insights as far as, well, maybe we should schedule some one-on-one so that we can communicate within each other, especially not being in the office a lot. Maybe you have a lot of users that are remote. That is also something that we find very important. And then for those of you that are familiar with the Headspace app, that is also something that we have self-curated into the Viva Insights application as well. So just a few screenshots here of what this looks like. So you'll see, again, the beauty of Viva is that everything is really just an app within Teams. We're kind of going directly to where our users are working, whether they're chatting, whether they're working on different documents with Teams, looking at their calendar. And you'll see here on the left side that this is really just an app. And kind of like what we talked about here in just a little bit, you can see in real time what this looks like. So for example, we have a focus plan. You can plan your focus time, book time, so that you can establish focus throughout the day. Your coaching time. So again, like what I talked about earlier, is that Viva Insights is really great at looking at who are the important people that you're working with, including your manager. And then you can click this option, find scheduling options to set up a one-on-one with your manager, so that you're not, missing out on any of the time with your manager and that important time with them. Another great aspect of this is, again, all self-curated, that if you're interested in any type of training or learning, some of these will pop up from time to time that maybe you want to look at leading remote projects and virtual teams. You can click on this button. You can book that learning time. That'll be added to your schedule. The LinkedIn learning session will be added to it as well. And then you can just take that 30 minutes of time and kind of improve upon yourself from there. We talked about the Mindfulness app as well. So you can start meditating. Again, your self-well-being and emotional status is very important when it comes to Viva Insights. And so you can have that application start a really good meditating practice for you, whether that be from daily or bi-daily. You can basically choose what you want to have from there. And again, this is what I talked about just a little bit ago, is this virtual commute. So let's just say that if you're using Microsoft Tasks in order to plan out your day, you can add those into here. You can click the end of your day, and then you can basically look at, okay, what tasks do I have that I need to finish by 5 p.m. You can have some reflection time. And then again, you can have some headspace guided meditation from there as well. So a lot of great stuff just to kind of make sure that your end users are kind of in a right mindset and therefore more productive going forward, and all just within an app that you can deploy again today for each of your personal users out there so that they can start using it. And then of course, again, that theme that we have here of a consistent behavior and having everything, if you're not necessarily on your desktop machine, everything that you just saw within this app will also be within the Teams app as well for Viva Insights. So all of this same stuff that we just covered from the desktop view is all something that's available within iOS and Android devices as well, all within the Teams application. And then of course, we're talking about deployment, super simple. You can see that I'm in my Teams admin center. I'm under my manage apps. And within here, I can just do a quick search for Viva Insights. I can now use this and deploy it to my users. I can customize it as much as I want. And then of course, you can always set up policies. And for my recommendation, if you really want your users to start using this, not only make it available to them, but you can also pin it to their sidebar as well from Teams as well, so that they can make use of it immediately and start using it as well too within their day-to-day business. Okay. So now we're going to roll into Microsoft Viva Connections. So when we're talking about Viva Connections, like I alluded to earlier, is that Viva Connections, the easiest part about this is really the deployment of the app in Teams. That's the easiest part. Where this is really top heavy is the SharePoint side of things within Viva Connections. So before we kind of go into these different slides, just kind of take note of that there's probably going to be a lot of SharePoint talk as we kind of go through here. But I'll also demo and give you guys a really good inside look as far as how we can deploy this, and then some best practices and what resources that we have available to you. So we can see Viva Connections is really, again, we see it as like the gateway to a modern employee experience that you have within here. And again, that consistency between all of the different Office 360 applications that we have out there. And this also goes for whether we are using a desktop machine, we are using mobile, we're using a tablet. All of these are going to really be curated for each of the individual users that you have out there, and doesn't matter what device they're actually using. So again, really what we're looking at here are three different, again, I could basically say pillars to Viva Connections as well too. We're going to really dive deep into these, so don't get confused when I go through these. So we have a personalized feed, which is basically going to roll up all of your company news, information, discussions, any of your company corporate communications. All of that is going to roll up within your feed. And so with that being said, before we continue, a lot of this stuff for the deployment of Viva Connections isn't necessarily just heavy on the IT front. This is also going to be heavy within your company communications stakeholders as well too, going forward. Now, depending on where you're at from a tenant in from SharePoint, as far as creating pages and stuff, that's really going to depend. Again, I'm going to go over a lot of the different scenarios that I see within the field to kind of make sure that you guys are comfortable with where you're at now and what we need to do in order to get to a comfortable area within Viva Connections. Then we also have a personalized dashboard, which is going to be really great for having role-specific tasks, actions, curated tools and resources. I'm going to show you a lot of great tools that really a lot within the field. All these users are going to have different tools that they're using. And we also have tools within Viva Connections that can make it really easy for you as an IT admin or a stakeholder to have different tools for each of those different roles that you have in there, whether they're a frontline worker or what we call a knowledge worker. And so I'll get into that as well. And then also we have this resources tab. So this resources tab is, again, something that you as an admin are not going to have to do anything with. All of this is going to be self-curated from using Microsoft Graph on the background, and that's going to be able to show all of your end users what we have available for files that they're working on, and what SharePoint sites that they're most hitting, Yammer sites. All that stuff is just going to be self-created from within there. So here's just a quick example of what the feed looks like. All of these, again, are just self-curated news posts that you're either creating within Yammer or just a SharePoint page as well too. All of that will just be within here. And you can notice that on the bottom left here, this is really just the Teams application. And then within Teams, we're just using Viva Connections here as well that, again, you could just deploy per user as well. And then again, most of your users are going to be using SharePoint and Teams for the most part. And what's great about this is that we're not having to really build out a brand new product. All of this stuff is really going to be all at your fingertips right out of the gate. And so while I mentioned that really all your resources, all of this again is all self-curated for your users. You can see all the My Sites, all the Yammer communities that are important for your end users, and all this stuff is just directly embedded within the application. You're really not having to do a lot in order to actually create this for your users. And then for the third one that we talked about is the dashboard. We're really going to hit heavy into the dashboard. Again, just a quick little tidbit into what this looks like. All of these are just cards that you can create as an admin, and you can get really creative with this. If you're really dev heavy within your organization, and you can start creating like expense report applications, your users can really just go into this dashboard and just really dig into creating that expense report, or they can get some time off, or any of the self-curated applications that we have as well, like Insights. All that stuff can just be within your dashboard, and you can get really creative with this as well. So it's, again, not a one size fits all. You can use audience targeting for each of these different cards, so that you can really, again, make sure that each of your different user bases has the cards that are most important to them, and not any of the cards that really they're not going to be interested in using. So really can get customized with this dashboard that you see here. Now, with that being said, there's a couple of misconceptions when we're talking about Viva Connections. But really, the aim of this is to make sure that we are going to where your end users are working the most, which is going to be Teams. And so we're kind of combining the power of SharePoint Online, where you're going to be able to publish news, any updates, and really kind of surrounds your intranet within SharePoint Online, and bringing that into Teams as well. So your users aren't having to go back and forth from SharePoint to Teams in order for them to get to the important information that they need to at all times. Now, what gets a lot of customers with this is that they're thinking that Viva Connections is going to be a complete replacement for SharePoint, and that is really not the case here. Of course, SharePoint is going to be the back end. It's going to be the engine that's basically going to have that page for Viva Connections, but really it's meant for these company communications. So if your end users are doing a lot within like a Word file, or if they're doing a lot within Microsoft Lists, that might be something that they'll want to go back to SharePoint. This is really curated for an intranet portal page when we're talking about the Viva Connections app. So let's take a look at what this looks like then. So this is just an example of what we have for Viva Connections within the desktop application within Teams. So for some of you that have been around for a while, there's also what we call a SharePoint app. The SharePoint app is almost like a third-party application though, and it is going to be able to display your SharePoint page, but there's going to be a lot of benefits with Viva Connections over that SharePoint app. For example, you're going to have this one-stop shop for any intranet resources, and we call this the Sharepoint App Bar. Again, we're going to talk about that in depth here. You're going to be able to have the company branded entry point. So again, it's not going to be Contoso. So for us, we can change that logo so it's Microsoft. And so right when I come in for the day, I have this pinned. I go to Teams, and this is the first thing that we can open up for any of your users, and all branded to each of your individual companies that you guys are working for. We're also going to have a more in-depth support for intranet search as well too. So if we're looking for a specific site, for example, you can search for that site. If you're looking for a file, everything is really embedded within the Teams application when it comes for search if your users are needing to use that. You're going to be able to create a full screen site with a header and navigation just directly within here. And then of course, there's a lot of contextual actions and support for collaboration as well too, whether or not we want to share the site, share a page, share a news article, all that stuff is directly embedded into the Teams Viva Connections application. So to dig deeper, so you'll see on this right side here that you can see the dashboard, and we've been talking about the dashboard, and you kind of were able to see what that looks from the mobile side. So this is again where we're talking about the consistency with each of the different devices that our users are utilizing on a day-to-day basis. And so you can see within Viva Connections, we have this dashboard. And again, what you can do with this is create your own different cards in here. You can use some of them that we have already built in, like the Insights app, for example. You can see that here. Then, of course, let's just say that you want to have like a COVID checklist for your users when they get in. You can have just a card in here for them to submit that. Maybe we have like some vesting dates and rewards for each of your individual users that you want to have on there. Maybe you want to even be able to have them submit an expense report directly from the Viva Connections application as well. All of these are something that you can do and develop with the help of a lot of the sites that we have out there, and get, again, very creative with these as we continue on. Now, here's another example of a Viva Connections site, and you can see here that we have the My News web part from Sharepoint Online. What's great about this is that you can see that if we do click on the My News, that'll bring up our page. Again, we're still within the Viva Connections app. We're reading a news page article here. And then you can see on the top right is that we have also some other really great features and functionality within here. If we click on that, we can share this news post. We can share it to a team. We can email it. We can copy a link. When you click on share, then you can see now that we're in my team, Northwind Traders, under the marketing group, and you can see that this is now posted. And now everybody within the marketing Northwind Traders can now, reply to this different news post article within here. Let's just say that user clicks on it. Again, they're within this news post article. If I click again, you can see on the top right here that there's this chat window button. And again, as I'm reading the article, I can chat with my other colleagues, do whatever I need to do, have that collaboration and culture that we were talking about in the beginning of this slide deck, really starting to kind of envelop within Viva Connections directly from here with all the different communications that we can have within each of the pages. So let's just say I close this. And so again, talking about the search platform that we have on here, and again, if you're familiar with Microsoft Search, that's really what this is driven out of. So again, we have a consistent search engine from Teams, SharePoint, anything within M365. And what's also great about this is that you can even add some special flair to each of this. So let's just say that we search for platform. You can see that Contoso portal is also within the platform, and you can see that we have this special flair just to kind of show, hey, this is a portal for this, make it a little bit easier for your users to understand where these different portals are. And again, we can have any of the files, channels, and groups, all of that is within the search engine from within here. This is also something that you're not going to get within the SharePoint Teams app as well. This is specific to Viva Connections. Now, that was the desktop application. So going on that trend of having everything consistent, everything that you have and created and curated within SharePoint is not only going to be visible within the desktop app in a friendly manner, but we're also, again, going to have the feed section of the Teams application from the mobile side as well, too. So again, really what we're showing here is that we are getting all the relevant news and all of the important news articles that is consistent with the desktop version directly within the mobile application. And this is where we can, have any chats as well, like what we just talked about. Click the back button. And again, all of it is a consistent experience. All of the same news posts and articles that we have within the desktop application will also be available within the mobile application as well. Same thing goes for dashboards. So all of these applications that I have within the dashboard, again, I'll show you how to create this as well too in just a little bit. All of these dashboard applications and cards that we have within the desktop version is also going to be consistent within the dashboard within the Teams application as well too under Viva Connections. Now we talked about this a little bit, but just to kind of visualize this a little bit further, is that it doesn't have to be a one size fits all. We can have frontline workers have specific ACE cards within the dashboard. We can have knowledge workers have different ones. And just to kind of visualize this, these are two different users on the same tenant. This user has like a COVID check, COVID updates, any rewards that they may have. And then this is a different worker, maybe a shift worker that is clocking in complete daily before showing to work. Any stock that's consistent with them. All of this can be customizable using a lot of the audience targeting features and functionality that we have within Sharepoint as well. And that's really the Viva Connections platform, very high level. So with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at what this is going to entail for us to deploy this out to our users. So as I go through these next slides, these are some of the things that I want us to think about. Again, these are kind of Sharepoint heavy terminology. We're going to get a little bit technical now, but these are really important concepts that we need to understand in order for us to have a very successful deployment of Viva Connections for our users, especially if we're not really that familiar with using Sharepoint as an intranet portal page. And again, everybody's going to be at a different stage at this point. So we'll talk about these a little bit in depth as well with some tools that can help you with this. But I really want us to think about is how modern is your Sharepoint Online environment? And so what do we mean by that? So these are some other questions that we have out there. Do you have a main portal site, and is that in classic or modern? What type of template are we using? That is going to be really important because Viva Connections is going to be required to have everything from the Viva Connections site collection be modern. So we really want to make sure that we're understanding where we're at from a tenant side, where we're from the page side as well, where we're at with classic or modern type of pages. Does your main portal have a flat architecture? And what do we mean by flat architecture? So again, traditionally from the Sharepoint side, years ago, best practices were to use subsites underneath a specific site collection. We've really flopped that now. Everything should now be a individual site collection. And from this one right down here is a good segue, are we using the hub site model? So are we using all site collections and using that hub site model in order to have that architecture for each of your different site collections? That's going to be really important for when we're deploying Viva Connections, especially when we're talking about the navigation side that we're going to talk about here in a little bit as well. And then another great thing that was just popped up the other day with another one of my customers is, are your content creators not your IT admins? Because your IT admins aren't necessarily creating the news posts and curating the different web parts that we have within Sharepoint Online. Are your content creators familiar with modern page design and being able to curate those different news posts to your individuals from a corporate communication side? If they are not, again, that's going to be another hurdle that we can help out with from the Microsoft side. But again, something to kind of consider here as we're looking at moving into Viva Connections. Now, before we go into the different steps, we talked about the hierarchy and having that flat architecture. And this is really what we're looking for from not only the engineering side, but also from the field side as well too, to make sure that we are setting you guys up for success, not only with Viva Connections, but really in the future as well too, because this is really the envision that we have. So we kind of put this into three different buckets as far as an example. So you have your specific team. And your specific team, and I use this as an example, let's just say that you're part of the IT staff, but your specific team is under devices. You work on devices, you work on Intune, and you have 10 team members, let's say, and you are storing your documents within a team site or an Office 365 group, and you're working on those individually, kind of more of that tight-knit type of work environment with just your specific team members. Now, again, you're part of the IT department, and your IT department will also have an overarching site collection, mainly going to be a communication site, and this is what we call the hub site. So your IT, as an IT staff member, you're under devices, but you also have some other colleagues under the IT hub site that might be, IT support. could be something with Windows devices, could be, all those different roles under IT that would still want to have some type of rolled up news posts for IT. And then once you're looking to do some more individualized work and working on, your different team members, that is where you kind of go down the line, and then we go to your team site. Now, where Viva Connections comes into play here is Sharepoint Home. So the Sharepoint Home, again, I want us to kind of reiterate this, that Viva Connections is your top level intranet portal page. And there's a reason why for that. And that will be basically the overarching landing page for all of your different users, no matter what department you're in. And what we really want to see here is that your users start in Sharepoint Home, which will be Viva Connections, and then everybody trickles down in almost like a spider web with each of their different departments. And then eventually, once they're looking at doing, their actual work, that will all be within the team's hierarchy from down there. So each of these hopefully will be all different site collections, not subsites. And then this is kind of the content roll-up that we have on here and where we want to be from an architectural standpoint from SharePoint Online, again, for Viva Connections to be successful. Now, let's cut into how we can deploy this now. So each one of these steps is very general and they're kind of loaded, to be honest with you. I'm going to go over each of really the bare minimum for each of these, kind of the best practices of what we want to accomplish here. Let's just say that you have a brand new tenant, you don't really have anything. This is going to be super simple as far as what we're going to go down the line with. But as we all know, most of you are already probably intertwined with SharePoint quite a bit, and that's really what we're going to focus on. So these are the steps that we're going to be taking: creating a modern communication site, configuring the SharePoint Online Tenants home site. And again, going back to this slide, that is what we're talking about here. The SharePoint home site is going to be Viva Connections. I'll explain that here in just a little bit further. And then I know that we have this set as optional, but I really highly recommend figuring out the global navigation, especially when we're talking about the SharePoint App Bar. Way back in the beginning of the Viva Connections side of things, you kind of saw that different navigation element that we had slide out on the left side. That's really what we're talking about, global navigation. Again, I'll demo that for us as well too. And then finally, deploying the Viva Connections app, which is without a doubt the easiest part about this. 1, 2, and 3 are definitely going to be the most heavy, and there's going to be a lot of teamwork between IT and your company communication side of things as well too. So let's start with creating and configuring and publishing your communication site. And again, as we state on the slide, it's definitely an overloaded step depending on where you're at from an architecture side. But this is where we're going to want to do a lot of information and architecture planning, making sure that we have our global navigation structure. We're using hub sites as much as possible, and that does entail using hub sites with site collections that are 100% modern. We're not using classic sites anymore. And then any of the search experience and the personalized content experiences. So again, a very overloaded step because this is going to be a lot of the design parts of things. And so with step 1, typically what we say is we need to understand what our users are looking for when they're going to an intranet portal page. Do we need to set up a pilot of this first as far as what that portal page looks like? And again, we want to make it so that it's successful right out of the gate with Viva Connections when we go globally with this as well too. So this is a very important step for us to kind of take a look at. So, and that also entails making sure that we have our Viva Connections dashboard and feed configured as well too, so that we know what our audiences are looking for with these different cards. They don't have to be really in depth immediately as far as like, creating like an expense report directly from it. But we can at least get some of them in there, like important holidays, shift schedules, just a link to your benefits as well too. All that stuff can be really important within the dashboard and can be something, again, that's not only from the Viva Connections dashboard within the desktop version, but also the mobile aspect as well too. So we always have that available. So I'm going to cut into some demos here.
Hey, Tony, before you kind of dive into the demo, we have some questions, and I know some of them
Sure.
I've kind of been responding saying we'll address towards the end of the session, but there are two that are in the window that I think, especially with the timing of this, if we can go ahead and just maybe answer that, that might help a little bit more.
Absolutely.
So there's one question saying, if we have multiple companies within our tenant, can you assign a different Viva Connection site to those companies?
Very good question. And that's actually going to come back to the Sharepoint Home side of things. So we will get to that, but you can only have one Sharepoint Home per tenant, meaning only one Viva Connections site per tenant as well. So if you have multiple tenants, multiple companies within the same tenant, you might need to break those out, and you might need to have a higher level Viva Connections page for them. Our engineering team has gotten feedback on that specific question of whether or not you can have multiple Sharepoint homes so that you can have curated Viva Connections apps for each of them, but we're not there yet. So that might be coming. We're kind of considering it, but yeah, we're not there yet.
Great. There's also another question from Jim. We have some sites that are associated to a hub. We have even more that are not. To deploy connections to all sites, have to be affiliated with a hub site, or can they remain independent?
They can remain independent. It's this is just the hierarchy of what we want really in the future for SharePoint Online. I should reiterate that it's not really a requirement for everything to be hub sites. You're still going to be able to connect them from the navigation side within Viva Connections, but to kind of have that, again, consistent experience for each of the navigation elements that you have, it would be best to kind of prioritize what we want to have for each of your different hub sites so that it's easier from the navigation elements from Viva Connections and down, if that makes sense.
Great. And then there's one last question, which we may just have to take offline from Joel. And Joel, I know you've kind of posted some other questions. We'll make sure to address those towards the end. But is global navigational still an option? He's under the impression, based off of some guidance, which we'll look at the link, that it's not available. So
global navigation should be available for everybody. That was something that was implemented probably about a year ago. I will go over in depth the navigation side of what we're talking about with global navigation. I think you're getting it mixed up potentially with like structured navigation and some of like the old elements that we have. I think we're probably talking about two different things, but yeah, we can certainly take that offline, or we can talk a little more in depth on that after.
perfect. All right, well, great. We'll make sure, go ahead, Tony, if you want to go ahead and proceed with the demo. And then once again, I'm keeping track, so don't feel like we're not forgetting about you. We'll address it towards the end. But thank you everyone for submitting questions.
Absolutely. Very good questions. Yep, those are very good starting questions, especially for Viva Connections. So yeah, hopefully we can address all of those by the time we're done. So all right, so back to where kind of step one, creating that modern communication site, making sure that we have it all set up with what our end users are looking for a top level intranet portal page, and then making sure that we have our dashboard configured with what our users are looking for. So I've already created a modern communication site that you can see here, and you can see that this is the landing. And again, I'm in SharePoint on just a regular browser, and you can see here that a lot of this was already self-created. But you can see here that I have my feed for Viva Connections already configured, and you can see all of the different news post articles that will be available here, and also consistent again with the mobile side of things. So you can see that just from a high level view just from here. And then you can also see the dashboard. So once we get to the point of wanting to build the dashboard for this modern communication site, a lot of people get a little bit mixed up with this, but really all that this is just a page within SharePoint Online. So if I click on my gear option, you can see set up Viva Connections, and I'll kind of zoom in here so that you guys can see that a little bit further. You can see that within that dropdown, we have set up Viva Connections. So if I click on that, it'll bring this dropdown. So since mine's already deployed, all I can do is just view dashboard. Otherwise, yours might say create dashboard, I think is what it still says. I click on that. And this is where I'm going to be able to create those different cards that we were talking about just a little bit ago. And so you can see from my demo that, I just have some just self-created ones where I have a quick weather application that's going to swing this out. Again, these are just demos. It is certainly not going to be 50 degrees where I am at. But again, you can kind of make sure that that is developed so that it's, specific to your corporate communication or for your corporate location that you guys are at. Again, expense report application. Again, all of these are some things that you can develop in-house. I will send out some really great information about creating these, what we call ACE cards, which again, you can create expense reports. You can do a lot of different things with that. But we also have a lot of great ones that are just built into the service as well too. So let's just say that we want to create another application within here with an ACE card within the dashboard. I just edited a page. And again, for those of you that are familiar with editing SharePoint pages, essentially this is all that this is. What's cool about this is that you can see the different views. So this is what the mobile view is going to look like, and this is what the desktop view is going to look like. So let's just say that we want to create a card. I click add a card. You can see all the different ones that we have on here. And if you're creating ACE cards, you can deploy these directly to SharePoint. You can create a card designer. And what's cool about this is that once I have that on here, I can edit the card. And for those of you that are, again, dev heavy, you can create JSON to basically whatever you guys want to have on here in order to make it really customized to what your users are looking to do. So again, if I create another card, I can take a look at any Teams apps that we have available. So if I click on that, edit that, we have different card sizes as well. So any app a Teams app that's available to me as a user, I can click on this. You can see all the different ones that are available. Let's just say that I want to have Viva Insights on there. That'll now add Viva Insights into this card for you. And then, of course, like what we've talked about, is that you can really get creative and curate each of these different cards to each of your specific users. So what you can do is if you just want the Viva Connections applications within the dashboard just for a specific user group to start, you can actually just create it, add in some security groups into here so that that is only focused on that specific group. It doesn't have to be everybody, and you can get really creative with each of these different cards that you have on here, whether you want them to be org-wide or whether you want them to be department-wide, or really if you want to have it just specifically for a few specific users as well too. And they're the only ones that will have permissions to see that specific specific card within the dashboard. So going back, and I'm just going to discard. So going back here, I have my SharePoint site created. I have my dashboard created. I have specific feed for Viva Connections as well too. That's basically deriving all the different news post articles that we have that are important for these users. All of this is now set up. Now what? So let's go back to our slides. The next thing that we're going to want to do is designate the Sharepoint Online Tenants home site. So I really like this slide because it kind of goes over a lot of the very common themes that we see with each of our different customers out in the field. And we typically roll them into 3 different buckets. We have organizations that are entirely on Classic, meaning normally this means that they came from on-premise to SharePoint Online recently. And a lot of their SharePoint pages are in Classic with Classic publishing, and they have custom master pages and CSS customizations all over it. So these are the organizations that are probably going to take the most work in order to get, that architecture of having that flat architecture and having everything modern, the most work basically with these types of organizations. Now, the first step that you typically want to have with these organizations is figuring out what would it take to basically convert that SharePoint page that we want to have for our company portal to modern. And again, us in the field, such as myself as a customer engineer, I've helped customers numerous times now of figuring out how can we convert this classic page into a modern page. So that would be first step for these types of organizations, especially if they really have a heavy following with that specific internet portal page within SharePoint as well. Then we have orgs familiar with modern, but with a classic top of the internet. This is the most common one that I see in the field, where it's kind of a mixed bag, where we have some important sites that are still in classic, and then some in modern. Companies are working on getting them modern, but some of them are bigger than others. For example, I have a customer right now that has probably their largest internet portal page, and they have like 5,000 subsites within there. And we're working right now on converting that and getting all the users off of that old architecture into the new architecture. And then once we have that new architecture, then we can designate that tenant's home site. And so it's an easier transition from your users from using classic to modern, so that they can start using Viva Connections from there. Because again, just to reiterate, everything from the SharePoint page side of things needs to be modern for the Viva Connections site and the page. And then we do have some orgs out there that are really just all modern, and typically these are brand new tenants, to be perfectly honest with you, that they don't want to use classic, they're all using modern. These are really going to be the home run type of scenarios for us from the Viva Connections side, because what you can do is you can see the most heavily used SharePoint portal page that you have on there. Hopefully it's going to be a very high level one. And then your users, basically all you're going to do is designate that SharePoint tenant's home site for that modern home site collection. And not only will they have it within SharePoint Online, but they're going to have it within Viva Connections within Teams as well. So that's the ideal scenario, not always the case. So there might be some work to do from these first two types of organizations if you're currently not within modern SharePoint. And again, I'm going to really talk about how we can help you guys and what tools we have available to you just right out of the box that's free, that can help you kind of orchestrate and itemize each of the different SharePoint sites and what your overall tenant health is from a modern perspective. So we kind of talked about this briefly with that question. So your home site, just a few things just to kind of make note of. You can only have one home site in your tenant or your organization, only one. That home site that you designate, which I'm going to show you here how you can designate that in a second, is going to be what's going to be viewed from Viva Connections application within Teams. So that's really the nuts and bolts of it. You step one, you create that modern page. Step two, you really designate that home site, and that is really what's going to be the core of Viva Connections for you going forward. Now, in order for us to set the home site, there's two different ways to do it. One, you can use PowerShell. You can basically see the command that you can run in order to set that home site URL, or we do have it available within the UI now if you prefer that, and I will show you where that is located. So again, we have the communication site that we want to designate as the home site. I want to set as the landing. I go in here. Now I'm in the SharePoint Admin Center. Again, you're going to need to be a SharePoint admin at minimum in order to get to this location. So just keep that in mind. And within here, you can see settings. And when I click on settings, you're going to see the SharePoint home site. I click on home site. This is my current home site. This is the landing. And you can see that I already have the landing set as my home site. Otherwise, you can just basically type the URL in, click save, give it maybe like 5-10 minutes, and then that will now be designated as your SharePoint home site going forward. And that is going to be the site that is going to be designated for Teams. And I'll show you that now. So again, this is just SharePoint, and I would log into my Teams application, but that would kick me off this meeting. So I'll just show you within the browser view. And you can see the consistency here. Now I'm in Teams, and you can see that I have the Viva Connections application right here on the bottom. And I'm going to go over how we can deploy that here in just a little bit. But the beauty of this, again, is that it's, again, the very consistent experience. If I am from SharePoint, if I am from Teams, if I'm on a mobile site, all that is just within here, within the Teams application, within Viva Connections. So we've created our modern SharePoint site. We have the dashboard, we have the feed, we have all that configured. We have it set as the home site. Now what we can do now is create our navigation. And like what I talked about earlier, is we call this the Sharepoint App Bar that you'll see here on the left. Again, I'm going to go over this pretty in depth here in just in a little bit, but this is again where you're going to be able to set up your global navigation, and this is what's going to be viewable and kind of like, again, that flagship navigation piece that I was talking about, not only within SharePoint Online, but also within the Viva Connections app. It's basically going to have a flyout window for your users so that they know exactly where the navigation elements are. So let me bring back my tenant. And again, on the left side, you can see the global navigation, and you can see the different navigation elements that I have within here. Now you're going to notice that these other three icons, we are building upon this as well too. But again, this is that consistency that we have within My Sites. So the My Sites is basically going to be like the resources section within the mobile application that we had on there. But you can see all the frequent sites that I have, any of the followed sites that I have within here. You can have My News. So again, you'll see that this is, again, the same thing that we have for the feed for connections. I click on My News. I can see all of them that are more heavily related to myself. One other thing to note here is that these three that we're going to, including the My File section, which is basically just my recent files, all of these three are not something that you as an IT admin can configure for your users. In my opinion, that would be a little bit too much. All of these are basically curated from Microsoft Graph individually for each of your user. So it's really, triggered for just them, not necessarily something the IT staff would need to do. But the global navigation is something that you can configure, and that is what you can see here. So in order to configure that, now that I have the landing as set as my home, I can click on this gear option, and then I will click on global navigation. And you can see hub or global navigation. Let's say I want to edit this navigation that I have on the wing here. I click on that. And so what's great about this, again, is that much like what we saw within all the dashboard cards, is that we can enable audience targeting for each of this navigation elements that we have here as well. So we can have different departments have different navigation elements that are specific for them. You don't have to. It can basically be like a corporate wide type of navigation as well too, if you'd like. But again, you can get very creative with what we have within the navigation elements. And so in order to create them, again, very easy. We click on the plus button. We can either create a link, we can create a label. You can see that projects is a label, information technology is a label, and underneath that is just the child links underneath each of these. So again, very simple. You can enable any of the audience targeting for each of these different links and labels and all that stuff as well too, much like again that we saw within the dashboard. So once we have that configured, and why this is important, in my opinion, in order to enable, let me close these out, is that now when I go into Teams and I click on this Viva Connections app, now you're going to see all of the global navigation within the Teams application as well. Everything that I just created within SharePoint is now available within this flyout menu. Again, you're going to be able to see My Sites, My News, all that stuff is available within here. And again, all of this is essentially the same thing that you're going to see within the mobile application as well. All right. So on to the last step. So again, this is the easiest one, and I just want to make sure that we're understanding each of the different options here. This first version one is the one that I'm not going to go into. It's not really my recommendation, and here's why. So we had version one that was released months and months and months ago of the Viva Connections app. And this Viva Connections app is basically a deployment so that you have it available in Teams. And so version one is going to be the desktop version only. You're not going to get the mobile version of it. It's also going to require you to deploy this as an app package to Teams. And you can see here, it's a little blurry, but you're basically going to package that up, use PowerShell in order for that to be uploaded into Teams, and then you're going to be able to use whatever you deployed to Teams as the Viva Connections application directly from there. Another thing is that, in my opinion, I kind of see this as the beta version of what we have Viva Connections. There's really not a lot of investment going into this version one of the Teams app. Not to mention you're going to have to redeploy it if you want to go to version 2, which I'm going to talk about here in a little bit. The only reason why I have seen this used in the past couple of months now that version 2 is out and in GA is if you really want to just like demo it without having, the mobile application side of things, which, it's kind of up to you. This is not what I would recommend going forward if you really want to have a successful deployment. So version 2 has been released. It isn't completely in GA, general availability. This is not in preview anymore. And what you're going to get with version 2, of course, is the desktop version and the mobile version of it. And the deployment, you're not going to have to create the app package and deploy it and do all that stuff. The Viva Connections app is already by default within your Teams admin center to deploy it to your users. And you can actually see that here. So again, just to kind of show you what that looks like. Bring this up again. So under Manage Teams Apps, under Manage Apps, I can search for Viva Connections. You can see that here. And I can click on that. And then this is where you're going to be able to do a lot of the customization of it. So let's just say, again, we're probably going to want to do this anyways. We don't want to have this Viva Connections logo. We can click on Actions, click on Customize. That'll bring up this fly window. And this is where you're going to be able to update the icon, update the outline of the icon, give it a different accent color if you want to. So again, you can get very customized with the Viva Connections application within Teams as well. Kind of up to you on how you want to design that. Additionally, and I always recommend this, as I always recommend doing pilots as well for Viva Connections, is you can set up specific policies for users. I'm sure all of you team experts know this already. You can create a policy for specific users, have it pinned for all those users that you want to pilot for so they can take a look at it. And then eventually, if it all goes well, you got enough feedback for the Viva Connections, then you can deploy this globally, have it pinned to them so that whenever a user comes into the office, they have the Viva Connections available to them so they can see all the corporate news, et cetera, that we've been talking about. And that's pretty much it. That is what it entails in order to deploy Viva Connections. Now, some of the things that we've talked about, and I'm glad that we've had some questions about the architecture side of things with Sharepoint for Viva Connections. This is something that I always recommend to start out with, just to kind of get a landscape of where we are at from a modernization approach with SharePoint Online. It is somewhat important for Viva Connections to make sure that we have that architecture set up for Viva Connections. But this is a free tool. You can download it right now. You can run it on your tenant and you can see exactly a report. And these are just some of them. There's a lot of them. You can look for a report for classic to modern sites. What sites are like the low-hanging fruit? What can we convert to M365 groups? Optimizing usage in modern lists and libraries, so you can see what are classic and modern. Another great one is if you are using info path forms, again, kind of a different subject. There's also a scanner report to seeing how many info path how much info path is being used of each of your different site collections, and so that you can do those conversions as well. Those are just some examples of the Sharepoint Modernization Scanner. And here's a quick screenshot of what that actually looks like. You can see what navigation is being used, what web templates are being used. Again, kind of important when we're talking about Viva Connections as far as what are we using for classic publishing portals, et cetera. What page layouts are being used. All this is great stuff for you as a SharePoint admin to prepare for getting into that modernization approach. And again, not only is this important for Viva Connections, but Classic isn't going to stay around forever. We don't have a deprecation date of Classic, but it's just more of a push that we've been looking for IT and SharePoint admins to really start to plan around what do we need to do to get to modern. Now, if you do have any questions on the modernization scanner report, again, there's a lot of us in the field that are SharePoint engineers that are very familiar with the scanner report. I have done in-depth scanner readiness reports for my customers in the past, putting in a PowerPoint presentation. So if you do need help with looking at this, it's a very daunting report sometimes. Please feel free to reach out to your account team, and we can help out with taking a look at that scanner report. Now, with all of that being said, going back to initially of just some of those questions that I wanted us to take just as a reminder as we're going through the deployment. So always the first question is, where do we start? And these are some of the questions, the very high level questions that I always start out with. Do you have an existing SharePoint site that can be used for Viva Connections? If it's classic, we cannot use it. What do we need to do in order to convert that into modern? How modern is your SharePoint tenant as a whole? So not just talking about that one site collection that's going to be used for Viva Connections, but what's the landscape of different site collections that we need to do, potentially some conversions, using hub sites, getting away from those sub sites as well too, just again, so that we have that consistent experience from Viva Connections all the way down to your different departments. And then again, how familiar are your end users and content creators with modern SharePoint? Do they know how to create these news posts? Do we know how they're going to be curated on any of the sites that we have within Viva Connections? Now, as far as the last one, we definitely have some workshops available if you do want some end user trainings from the customer engineering side. So again, you can reach out to your account manager and we can get somebody deployed so that we can get some training for your end users. But specifically for Viva Connections, we do have two very, very good workshops that I have run numerous times at this point to help with your IT team get prepared for Viva Connections. So the first one that we have is the Activate Viva Connections workshop. It is a 2-day. We cover, a lot of the stuff that we went over today as far as the deployment, but we also go over the importance of the architecture, what we can do to help out your end users. And it's a 2-day, really in-depth look is how we can get to Viva Connections. And then we can also help out with deploying a pilot for you as well too within that 2-day session. The workshop for Journey to Microsoft Viva Connections, a little bit less information from the SharePoint side, but it does get you a little bit trained into what does it take a little bit further. And that's a full 8-hour session, not just this 1-day, 1-hour session. There's a lot that goes into Viva Connections. And so these two would be a great way to start. Make sure that you guys are up to date with what we have for best practices from there. Like I say on the slide too, if you do need assistance with any of the modernization report, there's a lot of great SharePoint engineers like myself that can help out with analyzing that scanner report with you and develop a plan, maybe a project of how we can get you into modern, and so that again, Viva Connections is more of a smoother rollout for you guys. And then of course we have some resources, some high level stuff just to kind of get you started with Viva Connections if you're new with it, more of like a setup guide, all that stuff. We have a lot of great documentation out there for Viva Connections. So highly suggest taking a look at those so that, again, you can help prepare yourself and your end users for Viva Connections. And
wow,
that
Tony,
wraps
that was great.
up that content. Thanks, Sarah.
Oh, well, great. Well, we do have some questions from the group. So one of the questions was, Tony, when you were kind of showcasing how you could share content from the SharePoint site with your team, the question said, if you comment on that, where are the comments being stored? Is it going to be stored in the team or where that content is being shown from a chat perspective in